在第141集，我们探索了医生沟通的技巧。那在今天的单元呢，就来借由医生所可能会面临到的一些问题，让我们一起学习如何避免沟通上的障碍。Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast。I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast。我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. Back in episode 141, we talked about the ask, tell, ask method for oncology doctors to give tough news to patients. Well, we came across a few things that reminded us of the importance of how surgeons, physicians, and doctors need to create effective communication with their patients, and that there's a lot that we can learn from what makes good and bad bedside communication.
最近我其实在看一本书，那这本书的书名就是《Life on a Knife's Edge: A Brain Surgeon's Reflection on Life, Loss and Survival》。那这本书呢，我觉得带给我很多一些启发。那当然它一些比较，因为我还在念嘛 ，So I'll let you guys know how I feel about this book.But so far so good. 那这本书呢，让我想起来我们在第141集，我们就讲到这种医生很特殊的一种沟通的技巧，也就是 ask, tell, ask。那我就想到了，其实啊，医生真的是常常要面临这种沟通上有很多的障碍，所以我就稍微做了一点 research。那我就发现啊，其实真的在医生的这个领域呢 ，communication 也是非常的重要。So in my research, I found that there are actually a lot of barriers, and I think a lot of us could definitely speak to that. A lot of barriers that doctors often have to face is sometimes they have not a lot of time on their hand, or they don't want to over-promising their patients, or stress, anxiety. All of these are barriers and definitely stop them from having a really good and open communication with their patients.
And this patient communication becomes really important because communication is the basis for building relationships and building trust. And when communication is bad, especially in these very high-stress situations, there's always a gap between the communicator and the person receiving information, and that gap can create gaps in trust. So we actually looked at a few articles and methods again of how doctors learn to communicate with patients to close that trust gap. Actually, I was reading another book recently, Running with Purpose by Brooks Running CEO James Weber. And in the very end of the book, he talks about his own battle with cancer. And he talks about the moment that he wakes up from a surgery where they're checking his intestine and esophagus where they think there is cancer. And he's waking up and coming out of the drugs, and he spots his doctor. And his doctor is making rounds, and you can tell that that doctor is calling patients to give them the news of their test, like the result of their test. And the doctor kind of looks at him, and the doctor's face sort of drops. And then the doctor looks down at his sheet and then kind of walks away. But that moment where the doctor's face communicated what was going on, but he didn't come talk to the patient, even though they saw each other. James Weber talks about that moment where it just it deeply sat with him because he knew what was happening, but no one had talked to him yet. And so this goes back to, it's like those moments of small communication, if not done right, can be deeply seated into someone's mind.
Yeah, absolutely. 那当然在这样子这种 doctor-patient 的一个关系当中嘛，我们也可以从这些研究报告所看得到，就是当我们 patient 病人他对于这个 doctor 他有很多的信任，这个信任感很高的话，当然他们这个 result 也就是整个 treatment 的 result 都会比较正面的。那我觉得其实这种关系，这种信任的重要度，其实在我们所有的领域当中也都是非常重要。It works the same in every field, right? Even like for our field as a consultant, we also have to build that trust with the clients.
So when revisiting our episode 141, Ask, Tell, Ask, we thought very carefully about that first part, the ask. So in today's episode, we're not going to dive back through the entire process, but we're going to hone in on that first ask part. Because doctors, like all experts, suffer from one major problem, which is they know too much. And when you know too much, you often forget that the other side of your communication doesn't have the same baseline foundation as you do. So the first step should not be start to explain what's going on and start to give all the details. The first step is to ask and understand how much the other side knows.
那刚刚 Nick 有提到，就是在我们的专业领域当中，我们通常都是比对方还要知道更多的人。但是呢，当然这个就有个问题出来了，通常我们会以为对方其实跟我们的 understanding 是一样的。那在我们的这个 research 当中，我们就发现了一个文章 Why is communication skills of physician important for patient satisfaction? 那在这个文章当中呢，它就有一段就提到了The benefit and importance of treatment must be understood to improve patient adherence to medical plans, and physicians should attempt to understand patients' perspective by judging their understanding of a disease. For example, they could ask the patient to summarize what was said. If the patient and physician agree, there will more than likely be a positive outcome for treatment. 那这边真的非常的重要，因为在最后面嘛，如果他们对方 patient 跟这个 physician or doctor 他们都能够一起同意了一个 treatment， 他们的 outcome 绝对是比较 positive. It's a positive outcome.
And this ties back to that earlier discussion we had on the piece of trust. When physicians are asking the patient's understanding of the disease, they're not treating them like children or someone who doesn't understand. The whole point is to make sure that if we're on the same page, if we have the same understanding, we can start to build trust and the overall outcome will just be better. It has nothing to do with education. It has nothing to do with like looking down. It's just simply you and I are on the same page. We have the same desires. So the outcome will just be better because we have trust.
所以当我们常常在很 heavy, we're talking about the projects and we're in the middle of the meeting, a lot of time just kind of stop and pause a little bit and just to make sure that everyone's on the same page, right? Simply ask, to make sure we're on the same page, can you tell me your understanding of this project?
Or just to make sure our goal is aligned, could you tell me your definition of the success for this project?
就透过这些比较初步的去了解到底对方跟你是不是有相同的目标，而且是同样的 understanding， 这个一定会对这个 project 它整个的 outcome 是影响非常深的。
From my own experience, I find this really important. Because especially working on big projects that have multiple arms, different departments, different people are coming in, oftentimes we forget that if someone comes in midway, they don't have a lot of the early information. Or, we use tools like Slack, etc. to organize things. Sometimes people just came in later and there's one Slack discussion about the project, but then there's another group and they may not get all the messages. So these are really good opportunities to bring everyone back and go, okay, how much do you understand? What information is missing? And how can I make you feel comfortable getting on board with this project?
Absolutely. 我觉得千万不要 assume, 也就是以为大家都的认识都是一模一样, right? Do not assume you're making an ass of you and me, right?
Yes, never assume. You'll just make an ass of you and me, which spells assume beautifully. In the research, we also came across a second article, and this is a medical journal talking about the barriers to effective communication between family physicians and patients. But one of the reasons that this article really stuck out is because it was looking at physicians in Dubai who are handling multicultural patients from different parts of the world who speak different languages. And it wasn't just about, okay, physician to patient, but what happens when we toss in this like extra little cultural or language gap that it becomes even more important because some terminology may be the same, some understandings of treatment or what should be done the same. And we like this article because it connects back to our own audience who are working in international companies, working with clients or suppliers abroad. You need to think of that part. When you just assume that you and they are speaking the same language, let's just say English, you may not have the same context, whether it's cultural or just industrial understanding of where you're starting. So this ask becomes even more important.
Yeah, 当然我们在面对这么多不同文化背景的人，语言也可能不一样。大家的第二个语言都是英文的话 ，communication 还有它的这种 clarification， 你们是不是真的是朝着同样的目标前进？这个真的变得非常的重要。那当然，如果没有这些良好的 communication， 没有这些 trust， 以后会有很多的障碍，很多的 misunderstanding, and that's definitely something that we don't want.
We covered a lot of ground in this episode, but what we really want you to come back and take away from this is thinking deeper about that ask part. When you're starting a project, when you're starting something complicated, don't just dive in with all the details, with all your plans, with everything laid out piece by piece. The first thing in order to build trust with any type of audience is ask and understand if they have the same starting point and the same foundational understanding as you do.
Exactly. So guys, just ask, don't assume.
We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production, produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.